The future of New World is interesting, but perhaps also a little bit confusing. Today we just had a dev video and there are some interesting points in there, but let me be clear, there is no major new announcements here. With that in mind, let's jump in. So the first question is, come back in May. I think this relates to a statement that Scott said in one of the videos. I think people sort of took it a little bit too literally, and now people are saying there's no content until May. Now, factually, that is incorrect. We are indeed getting cross-server expeditions. We're going to get the 10-man trial, controller support, and probably a few other little things, okay? But practically speaking, that's not much content from the end of the expansion or the start of the expansion in Season 3 to Season 5. Season 4 literally had the glacial turn and that's about it. Obviously we did have the story, the seasonal story and stuff like that, but not really that interesting. And the Season 5 is going to have the 10-man dungeon, the 10-man trial, that unfortunately was actually supposed to be in Season 4. That's really the majority of the content that we know is coming after the expansion. Now, the little bit confusing bit here is, what is the future of New World even like? Scott said something along the lines that the update is coming in May. Now, I think this is a little bit of a misspeaking. I think what they mean to say here is that the announcement is coming in May. I don't think the content is coming in May because that doesn't make any sense. We know that Season 5 is coming around about the 12th of March, and we know then that Season 6 is coming around about the 12th of June. Now, in theory, all of the good stuff that we're getting announced in May could come in June. In practice, that's not really the way I see this going. I think in May, there's going to be 2 announcements. I think we're going to get console formally announced, and that might come maybe in June. It might come in any point from June till the end of the year. I obviously don't really know, but they wouldn't be talking about content and announcement unless something major was coming. That major, to be honest with you, is going to be another expansion. It just logically makes too much sense. Scott had said, I think around about Brimstone, that there was going to be a major content update every year, and I'm expecting, honestly, another expansion coming this year. And I don't think it's going to be October. I think it's going to be September. 3 months after June 12th is going to be around about September 12th. And that's when I think the expansion will be expected or intended to come out. Now, it might get delayed, but that's what I think is going to be the plan. And I think one of the reasons they brought Season 4 forward was so that they could keep or try and keep the schedule where they release the expansion in September. They generally wanted to do things earlier in September, but things have often got a little bit delayed. That happened to the original game, and I think that happened in the expansion as well, although that wasn't really officially stated. So I think only the announcements are coming in May. I'm not sure what will be in Season 6, but I think Season 7 is probably going to be another expansion. What I would guess is that maybe that's when matchmaking and that kind of thing might come in, because it'll be stuff that they don't want to do in an expansion, but people actually want and need. But one thing that I think is for sure is that whilst there is officially content until May, really it's not very much content. And the 10-man seasonal trial is probably the most interesting thing, and that's coming round about the 12th of March. As for the rest of the video, there wasn't really that much stated. There was a couple of questions about exploits and hackers. They never go into details on this, and no company goes into details on this, and what they say is we ban them as soon as we find them, and we are trying our best to do that. The other Scott was mentioning how they have access to the team at the Easy Anti-Cheat, and they're saying they're working really hard. I know many of you don't actually really give a damn about Easy Anti-Cheat, but they say that they send some data over to them and all that kind of stuff. That's always like chasing your tail. By the time you ban people, they then figure out a workaround, and then they have to ban those people, and they generally do it in waves so that they don't give away what was the thing that caught them. But fair enough, that happens. They mentioned that they're hoping that there'll be no bugs in Season 5. I mean, I'm not as confident as they are, but we'll see. They did mention about how they want to rework old content and basically buff the rewards for some of that stuff. So they mentioned the worm. Basically, the worm is only really worth doing for dark matter at the minute. They spoke about how the gear could be improved, and they said the same for the hatchery as well, that the gear, well, the content's good but the gear's bad. Fair enough, makes sense. There's no reason to have content in the game that you're not using in some capacity. Ultimately, you end up like needing more and more content if you do that, more and more rides, otherwise people are going to get bored. I mean, you still need more and more rides, but you need them at an even greater pace if you obsolete your prior content. Now, there was a question about progression basically, but it wasn't really framed as this. It was sort of framed about how we're going to have like named items with the 2 perkers and then you pick the 3rd, and how, you know, people like that, they want more of that and less of actually being prescribed the 3 perks. If I'm honest, named items are good in the expansion, but they're still not quite super satisfying to me, and I think that's possibly the way that they're presented and the fact that some of them aren't really very unique. Artifacts are purely unique, and when you see them, you know you've got it because it's a completely different color and it's right at the very top. I've been farming occasionally, not very often, the Frigid Dawn heavy set from the Glacial Tarn, and sometimes when I get it, I actually don't even realize I've got it because I've got so many items, it's not in the top 3 or 4 positions, however many there are. And that's deeply unsatisfying. I have to sort of click in and see if I got it, which to me sort of defeats the purpose. Like, it defeats some of that joy of like, oh, I got something good. I don't mind this system though. I think this is a completely fine system of having like 2 perk named items that you can upgrade. I think it's fine. Could it be improved? Probably. Are we keeping it until the expansion? Definitely. There was a question about balance and faction balance and influence races. Now, I was a little bit peeved with this answer a little bit, because if you look at the data, of course they're going to say, hey, the numbers are reasonably balanced across most of the servers, because on most servers they probably are. But I'm guessing if a time where maybe one faction has a lot of people who do wars and then they leave to go to a different server, that it will create a massive imbalance and it will take time for that to balance itself out. And the question was basically, there are times where it feels like there's 5 of us or 3 of us against 30, and they said, well, that doesn't often happen, and of course they're right. But this question I think is a little bit problematic in itself, but you know what I mean is for the wider MMO community, there is a massive problem with open world PvP that I think is going to become a lot more highlighted in a game like Throne of Liberty, but let's not worry about that just yet. And the problem is, open world PvP lends itself to Zergs, and they actually said that if you have a good coordinated small group, you can do a lot of work and you can be competitive, and that's true. But the reality is, in a lot of situations, most of the people are equally skilled, sort of equally coordinated, and most of the time the one with the bigger numbers wins. Pretty simple. I don't think anybody really disagrees with that. Sure, if you want to have like a crack team of elites, fine, but a lot of people just want to walk over to an influence race and have fun, and if the numbers aren't balanced, then that's not going to be the case. Now, they rightly say, to be fair, that you can't stop people participating, but actually you sort of can. It just depends on the mode. In open world, you can't really stop people participating. They want to encourage everybody to participate, therefore the numbers are even. But then if the faction balance is a little bit off, then that doesn't work anyway. And let's face it, New World's never done a great job of balancing the factions, and what's happening recently is that your faction is becoming less and less relevant, therefore it's becoming less relevant for people to try and balance it. And then you have a situation where maybe the greens are the more popular, maybe the purple are the more popular. Very rarely the yellows, but you know, who's playing yellow? I know some of you are, don't at me. Anyway, they said they're not going to do anything here. Basically, they're not changing this in any meaningful way. The teleporting is staying, they're not going to change the numbers, and they're not going to do anything from faction balance. So they're maybe just going to buff the rewards for the influence races. Maybe. I think personally, what I would like is maybe, you know, 100 v 100 v 100 in a big instance map where, you know, you actually do cap people and you do stop people from playing, because I think it's more fair, more fun, and more balanced. But the influence races are fun as well. It creates a little bit of dynamism in the open world combat, at least. They did address the elemental scaling bug. I won't go into massive detail here, but if you do a physical range damage weapon, sort of like the bow musket or blunderbuss, and you convert that damage into elemental damage, then that's not being affected by the PvP scaling, meaning it does more damage. Now, that's still in play today. I think they said it might be getting fixed tomorrow, actually. But what it basically meant was that a weapon like the Boltcaster, when it got buffed, was doing way more damage than everything else, so they disabled the Boltcaster. That bug is actually still in place right now. When they fix it, I'll be very curious to see if they rebalance the numbers because of that elemental scaling. We'll have to wait and see. And if they don't, the ranged weapons could become a lot weaker, which might be good in Outpost Rush, but I don't necessarily think ranged is overly, you know, overtuned or anything like that. The main thing that they address here is that they were too slow in fixing this, too slow in noticing it, too slow in resolving it, and they sort of hoped that they could just leave it, but the Boltcaster and the changes to the scaling basically meant that they had to at least disable that one. The reason Boltcaster is an issue, by the way, is because it was 99% scaling or changing, converting, which meant it was pretty much not being PvP scaled at all. It was just doing like an extra, I don't know what the percentage is, 10%, 14%, something like that. There was a question about gold sinks and maybe respecking using Azoth instead of gold, and they say that respecking is actually the third gold sink. And when we say gold sink, we mean gold that is literally destroyed, not passed from player to player. So this is like 12% of all the gold sinks, and if they just remove it, it means we go into a inflationary period. I don't really have a problem with this one. It probably is the thing that is stopping me from getting rich, because a lot of the time I'm just respecing to try a different build to go into an outpost rush. That is literally my main content. My main thing here is that when we get the dungeon finder as well, we might have an issue where people start thinking it's not really worth doing a dungeon because I can't bother respecing, but I don't know if anybody really feels that way. I'm not really too stressed about that. They said they might have a decision on this recently or soon. I sort of hope they keep it in a way because they need something to replace the gold sink. Now maybe they have something up their sleeve, I'm not really sure. They're adding a third mutator, but we already knew that because of the PTR. And they did speak about a couple of bugs, specifically the MSQ and one affecting the journal. And they say here, if you are still affected by an MSQ bug, please give them as much detail as possible. And they didn't say this, I'm inferring this, because they've like updated the MSQ a couple of times. Depending on where you were in that process, there's a lot of permutations basically. So, you know, some people could have completed this quest, some of that quest, and they don't really know where you're up to, and you might be like an edge case where you've just like, you know, you fit through the cracks. They say that they fixed most of them, so give them as much detail as possible, please. So we had a couple of different things in that Q&A. We had some questions which I think had answers that you would generally expect, nothing crazy there. And we also had this comment about, you know, the content coming in May or whatever Scott said. I just want to reiterate, I think that was simply just sort of like, I don't want to say loose dialogue, but I think the announcement is coming in May. We're obviously not going to get the content in May because that wouldn't fit any kind of schedule, okay? That's between season 5 and between season 6. It's in that little gap. I am personally predicting, if I was to bet money on it, which of course I'm not going to, is that I think the expansion for everybody will come in September, and that'll be season 7, and then season 8, by the way, will be December, in case anybody cares, and that's why they brought that one forward. And then console could be at any point from May to the end of the year, I think. Now, I may be wrong on that one, but I think we're heading that way, considering we're getting control support in season 5. I think that just makes sense. Neither of those two things are confirmed, by the way. That is my wild speculation, but I think on this one, there's a lot sort of hinting at that. But feel free to not believe me. I've been wrong several times, and I'll probably be wrong several times again. For now, have a most beautiful day. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.